made the right decision get rewarded. The people that made the wrong decision get slashed or something like that, right? And then you have to lock in that system if you dare to participate in this arena of governance.
We have an amazing lineup here, but I want to make it a bit more interesting. So instead of just introducing yourself, you're gonna introduce like one of the basic concepts for today. So I want to start with Dave. Intro yourself and then tell us, would you say decentralization matters and why?
That always happens, I swear. Hey everybody, I'm DeFi Dave. I'm head of North America at Dinero. I'm also the co-host of the Flywheel podcast. And I think decentralization absolutely matters. Why are we all here? What motivated me to really get into crypto and what made me stick around is I believe that it's sovereign empowering technologies in a way for us to cut out the middleman. It's really inspiring, and not everything is going to be decentralized, and I accept that. But if we don't strive for it, then what's the point? Then why are we all here? Then why don't we go back into the old system? So yes, I think it absolutely matters.
We're talking about governance and Tokenomics. Nico, how does governance relate to decentralization?
So my name is Nico. I think governance is quite important for decentralization, primarily from a security standpoint. You don't want your smart contracts or protocols to be owned by a single entity, to be controllable by a single entity. You want to spread out that ownership, and that's what governance can do for you, given that the tools that allow you to do governance, like, for example, tokens, are also equally distributed well, which is just as important as governance and solid governance rules by itself.
Amadeo, when did you first hear about VE, and what makes you excited about it?
Yeah, thank you. Like, I first heard about the vote-escrowed tokenomics when I received my Curve CRV airdrop and trying to figure out like what is this thing? I'm logged in for 4 years in this token. I suddenly got you check your DBank or Zerion was back in the day, and suddenly my portfolio value shot up a lot because I got this airdrop. I check and it was locked. It's like, what does this mean? So that's my first experience there, and I very quickly thought to myself, like, what vote-escrowed tokenomics basically means is that we're all kind of locking some of our governance power together as a collective of this protocol, and we will try to steward the protocol into the right direction, so we're all long-term aligned to make this thing work and create value together. That's how I kind of felt it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I mean, one of the original challenges that VE Tokenomics was aiming at solving was, this situation where somebody comes in, votes on something that would, in essence, kill the network, and then they just disappear. So the idea here was like, okay, let's align incentives for the long term. Do you think, the Curve VE design that everyone can chip in, like, do you think the Curve VE design managed to solve that problem, or did it create new ones? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, my opinion has been that the vote-escrowed tokenomics micro-aggro from Curve release is a genius model. I would say it's not perfect, but it's a very good model and a right step in the right direction. And I think the CRV VE CRV model is good. It could get some upgrades or maybe sub-DAOs or kind of upgrades in the margin. But generally, I really like the concept, and in my opinion, what will happen if Curve as a protocol maybe makes the wrong VE governance decision, the protocol can just be restarted with a new VE curve, and then you kind of run it again and again and again and again until the best AMM model with the best pools and the best incentive structures work. Yeah.
How do you think that can start? If, like, in theory, if they want to restart it, would it be through a vote or through something else?
Well, so I don't think they need to restart, but that was my more philosophical thinking about VE tokenomics, that you can restart it, you can replay it, and we can see what is the best for the protocol. And I actually think that the Curve design now, Velodrome with the VE33 innovated in a very interesting way on top of it. But I think also what Curve is now doing with the pack keepers, and there is also a lot of innovation in the VE Curve model as well going on. So everything is constantly innovating, constantly moving. And the nice thing about the VE tokenomics, it's a collective thing. Nobody can say like, well, you know, I do think the vote participation goes down too much. So that's one really big issue, that people that play a role in those kind of governance systems do need to be compensated or somehow recognized, I guess. But yeah.
Well, I mean, Dave, you like you guys are building Hidden Hand. Like, is this so it's a liquid lobbying marketplace, so to call it,
Yes.
aka bribes? Is this a bug or a feature of the system?
Oh, it's absolutely a feature. These things are happening anyway. You can call it lobbying, you can call it bribing. I like to call it incentives. It's an incentive marketplace. And we've seen a few things in the past where these bribes happen behind the scenes. I think if you guys remember like 5-6 years ago with EOS, they had 21 block producers. And before the network launched, everyone was like, pinky promise, like we won't do any bribing or anything. Right when it launched, it was all this bribing, it was all behind the scenes, you didn't know what was going on. So what Hidden Hand does, it brings it transparent, it brings it into the fold, and it benefits protocols because they get to have liquidity, which is important, especially for stablecoins. It benefits LPs because they have an extra source of revenue, and it benefits the token holders and people that care about the ecosystem because you can actually see how healthy the ecosystem is based on the direction of the flywheel, whether it's a positive flywheel or a negative flywheel.
Like so bribes is one of the things that people complain about. The other one is like the convex situation, where you have like a liquid abstraction on top of like perpetually locked tokens. Nico, what's your take? Is that inevitable? Is it symbiotic? Is it extractive?
Yeah, if you're asking whether that's a feature or a bug as well, I think it's definitely a feature. I think it's inevitable. I think the same thing happened with liquid staking as well, whereby first, you staked assets, they were locked for some period, or you had to wait for a week or more than that to get them back. And liquid staking kind of solved that issue for a lot of people. It doesn't eliminate the risk, you just transfer the risk to someone else. And the same happens really with liquid lockers. If you lock in your governance tokens and you want to transfer them to someone else, you transfer the risk. It's not like you're suddenly, or your position is suddenly out of, any dangerous situation if you're voting with a bad conscience or anything like that. So from that perspective, I think it's inevitable, just like bribes, just like other things like MEV. It's a matter of, do you harness this for good or for bad? And if we build tools that allow people to harness it for good better, then that's just plus EV for everyone.
Yeah, it's.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think economically, it's definitely a feature. Like, more liquidity, hooray! But politically speaking, I think it's actually a bug, and I think that because you have people that do not have the same interests of the protocol, they're with a different protocol, and so they might have a different agenda, or they might have a different, just a different mindset on things, and because they do not have, a direct stake in this protocol, they have this kind of proxy stake. I think at times there can be conflict, and I think that's something to be aware of with these wrappers.
Okay. Well, you guys mentioned the idea of like resetting, and forking is a form of governance that is somewhat underutilized. What are your thoughts on like that approach?
It's a very radical approach. I think it should definitely be the last resort, but it's definitely an option for many networks that have a token. I think especially if you look at the original staking networks, L1s or L2s, I think that was something that happened in the past with ETH Classic and Ethereum. But luckily it hasn't happened too often, because it's a very radical thing, and I would rather resolve things amicably and not split the community and the network into multiple parts. But yeah, it's a very important option to have.
I think we need to fork more, but we need to keep it more contained. We have gone through a phase for somehow as this whole community, we're building all these monolithic super DAOs, right? And I think if we cut it up, just like how Congress works, or like Dave was actually you were in politics for a while, for example. You were doing all these lobbying as well, right? So it's like that's not a you're not lobbying to like the United States government. You lobby to the subset of things, right? So
Yeah.
that's how the real world kind of consolidated. And I think that also needs to happen in decentralized autonomous organizations where it's going to be more a split. Like, okay, and at YieldNest, we're also trying to design it. It's really difficult because there's no frameworks, nobody's doing what I would love to work together with people that are thinking the same way. How can we compartmentalize, like make compartments or like make smaller DAOs? For example, oh, there is this DAO that manages this one strategy, right? The strategy is not doing very well. Okay, and that DAO got asked to step down or do something, and they don't do it. Okay, then you fork them out or something like that, right? So you could make the argument that people are like having vote log economics on the top level, but then they can delegate the vote to a certain subset that can blow up, right, if they make the wrong choice. And I don't see that many examples of that in the wild nowadays, but I do think that's where we need to move. And I'm not sure how it's exactly going to look, but I think that sounds more logical to me, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we need to figure out to get there.
Yeah.
One thing that I did not put in the list of questions that you guys saw, but is another criticism of the system was like, oh, like, you know, these founders are asking people to log their tokens for 4 years while the founders and the early backers, like, bags are actually vesting. Is that like do you see that as a predatorial practice towards community participants, or do you think that, you know, the model still, like, the benefit of the model still outweighs that challenge?
I think it can be both, right? Like this is the way that you implement it. I do think it's good for the founders to eventually like delegate more to the community or see what the users want, right? At the end of the day, we're building for users, we're building to generate revenue. What do the users really want? And if the founder can delegate it to a subset of people that can take that over from him, yeah, that's perfect. Well, that's a really hard thing, and most of the time that's not possible. So yeah, that's a hard question.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure if it was intentional to have that lockup period for 4 years and, you know, be that longer than the vesting period. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I was a little skeptic of the initial, you know, curve fee tokenomics with the long lockups, the linear progression. I think there's definitely been improvements in designs of, you know, V tokens that are very interesting in that regard, that do tackle some of these issues, like that 4-year lockup period if you want to get the maximum out of it. I think there's
go in there. Tell us about these developments.
Well, I think maybe you can also direct a little bit there, given that you're deeply involved with some of them. But I think, yeah, there's just a lot of things that grew since the initial V tokenomics design, that even, you know, traditional staking protocols might even learn a thing or two from, because they haven't really evolved that much in the past few years, while V tokens have been evolving quite rapidly. So yeah, I'd love to get into some of the improvements, but feel free to.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that we're alluding to is something that Andre tried to experiment with Phantom, and then, you know, over the past few months, Aerodrome and Velodrome have made incredible, like they've been quite successful. Whether that success is going to be sustainable, it's TBD, but like the model seemed to have worked really well for them, which is like the V NFT. So yeah, I mean, it is a meaningful innovation. So what's you know, how do you think that changes the balance?
Yeah, I think it comes a little bit. I think they borrowed a little bit of the ideas from the traditional staking world, whereby you don't pick your lockup before you stake your tokens. You just stake your tokens, and the longer you're locked up, the better your sort of rewards get. I think that's more in line with what users want and were expecting out of, you know, V tokens initially. And I think that's just one of the good developments there.
Yeah, my opinion on it is, like, I think that Velodrome did a tremendous job, and Andre VE33 it kind of flipped the model on its head, right? And there's improvements there, but I think actually eventually these models need to be even more dynamic and more compartmentalized, like more into like sub-DAOs or things like that. I think that's where it's going to evolve into. But the VE33 model is a great step in the right direction. But at the end of the day, at some point, somebody will figure out how to game it, right? Like currently the VE-CRV model, for example, the bribing efficiency, if it's higher, there are certain ways for the liquid lockers to kind of take some margins out of that, okay, right? But then ideally you want the VE tokenomics to be some sort of a poker game, that you keep the cards to your chest, everybody plays these epochs or something, and then makes bets on what they think is the longest term best decision. And if they make the right decision, they get rewarded. If they make the wrong decision, they get punished. And how do you do that in a way that there's no bots or other people that are gaming it, right? I think that is the holy grail. And I think the VE33 is a step in the right direction. Yeah.
And now you have VE systems that aren't called VE systems. One is Dyad, which is a stable coin. If you want to mint Dyad, you have an NFT. And if you want to boost your emissions, you stake kerosene into your NFT. And the longer you stake, the more you get powered up. Another one is Berachain. Berachain I just view as like Curve, but at a chain level. You have BGT, which is this non-transferable governance token. And the more BGT you get, the more governance power you have to steer, emissions, fees. So VE has gone beyond VE.
I love that. I wish we could end here, but we can't. I mean, one of the other interesting elements besides the way that the locking curve and the escalation of voting power evolves with the VE NFT is the fact that it's transferable, and then which means that there is like going to be an exit sequence. Nico, I know you're building an exit sequence marketplace for LRTs, roughly. Do you think there's going to be an exit sequence marketplace for VE NFTs?
Good question. I hadn't really considered that because we've been so deep into, indeed the LSTs and the LRTs, not so much into the different, governance locker ecosystems yet. Whether there will be a marketplace for that, it's an interesting question. I think, yes, there will likely be, and it will likely be revolving around timing of votes and people wanting to acquire more voting power fluently, or getting rid of that if there's a risky proposal for the protocol out, maybe. So definitely an interesting development that could take place, but not sure how exactly it would evolve and what the different kind of dynamics would be. And I think that's very important to at least get an idea of before we start creating such a marketplace.
Yeah, I agree. The governance attack factors are quite big. We saw that at VE Bell, right? There was this whale that kind of gamed the system, and then the team had to negotiate with the bell holder to make right decisions. And that happens all the time. So we need to make sure to make these systems not attackable. But yeah, there will be definitely marketplaces and things are happening, but I don't know how they will look like. Yeah.
Didn't something happen with Aura too a while ago? Aura?
Yeah.
With Aura and Bell, yes, there's some stuff. I'm not an expert there, but I saw some interesting things.
Like one of the automations that sort of helps in that regard is the auto voter. You mentioned AI agents potentially. Basically it's another layer on top of the bribery markets, right? And that gives participants an easy way to harvest yield for themselves without necessarily being subject to other manipulation. Speaking of yield, we are at a staking conference. So should the locked assets be staked or restaked in some should the locked assets just stay in there in the VE NFT, or should something happen with the underlying asset? What are your thoughts, guys?
I think there's a few factors that goes into that. One, is there demand for that asset to be restaked? First and foremost, if there is, okay, great. If there isn't, all right, move on to the next one. Second thing is, are you able to withdraw in a safe manner in case something gets slashed? If you can, great. If not, move on. So there's a few different things to consider. I think once it gets economically valuable enough, you can consider it, but I'm not sure if we're exactly there yet. There just has to be demand. That's the main thing.
Any diverging thoughts?
Well, it's a dangerous game to play because then you're all of a sudden, becoming sort of a treasury protocol amidst of your core business. Maybe not all users want that their funds are being, staked somewhere else or being used to generate yields. Not everyone might have that expectation. And honestly, I think, it would be better to focus on your core protocol rather than becoming, a managed fund that then puts yield back into the treasury and distributes it. Maybe that's something that could happen with a part of that staked funds, but it all has to, be agreed on by all users or be optional.
Definitely optional.
I think like one of the interesting elements there is if you start potentially using some of the like network-based assets in the governance of a protocol. So Lido being like a pretty high-profile example where the holders of the staked ETH also have this certain decision-making power, right? And then then what goes in the locker is not only your own governance token, but you can have a locker that uses staked, or like another interesting example is mode. There, it's the balancer pair of USDC versus their token versus mode that goes in the locker, and then you have like an otherwise yield-bearing asset that you're sort of locking in to participate in.
Yeah, that gives optionality, and that's what our goal is with Tenderize when we launch our token. It will not just be governance by the governance token, it will be primarily and first for the users of the protocol. So locking in your liquidity pool tokens into a vLocker and being able to participate in governance with those, I think is actually a very important alignment, that it's not just a governance token. If you look at other networks as well, like let's take LivePeer, for example, their token was originally used for staking and running nodes, but now it's actually also used for governance, whereby you can vote with your staked or delegated stake directly. While not being a V token, it has similar mechanics to that. So I think there's definitely a path for more alignment between governance tokens and the network or protocol itself.
Yeah, I fully underwrite that as well. And then on top of that, I would say that, yeah, governance and then participation. But we see over and over again that participation doesn't really happen, right? So I would say there needs to be a little bit more, a bit more carroting, like a bit more giving people not only staking, but motivate people to become active and really care about, like, okay, what are we going to do with this protocol? How are we going to do, or delegate that power so that they can delegate it to somebody that, in their view, will make the right decisions for the protocol. But there's still the issue that is still very hard. Yeah.
Governance is tricky. Yeah, I think delegation is the way to go, because if you have too many chefs in the kitchen, you're not going to get anything done. So you're much better off to get people that genuinely care, that actually can like take the time to do stuff, compensate them accordingly, and that's the right way to do governance.
Like the place where VE originated has always been around AMMs, right? It was Curve, now it's Aerodrome and Velodrome, but there are potentially other implementations that could be interesting. Dave, you mentioned Verachain. Like, where are you guys excited to see this model propagate outside of just an AMM?
Yeah, I think it can potentially solve the whole governance participation model where, hey, we're going to vote on something together. If we make the right decision, everybody that made the right decision get rewarded. The people that made the wrong decision get slashed or something like that, right? And then you have to lock in that system if you dare to participate in this arena of governance. So I'm looking forward for the governance arena so people can fight about decisions.
Yeah. I still think AMMs are the best use case. My co-host Kit, I have to shout him out. He said on a pod I had, with VE tokens, the tokenomics is the product, and there's no better way to bootstrap liquidity than with VE tokens. So I think AMMs are still the prime use case, but like you said, with governance, with network security, I think there's other avenues, but like I said, AMM's the golden use case.
Yeah, I'm just looking for more convergence between V token designs and governance models there, and the sort of the traditional staking world and their governance. I think that's sort of happening, and like I mentioned before, I think both worlds could learn a lot from each other. I think originally DeFi was looking at that a bit and said, hey, we need this type of governance that allows us to stake tokens and then participate in the protocol, very much like running a node and staking is participating in an L1. An AMM or a DeFi protocol doesn't really have that, but now there is a way to actually participate in it, whether it be through voting unlocking V tokens. But in terms of design and mechanics, I think, or at least I'm hoping for a lot of convergence in the next few years in the different sort of subspaces that we have there.
I guess what you can also say is, like we said at the beginning, anything that's long-term aligned, where people are in it together for the long term, could use VE tokenomics. So with that framework, you can think of the areas of DeFi, anything with like public goods, distributing funds, something with DePIN that I can't think of right now because I'm not in DePIN, but anything where there's long-term alignment, you can use the VE model.
But shouldn't long-term alignment just be everywhere?
Shouldn't just be, I don't know, maybe. Depends. People have, different time horizons for different reasons. So some people have short-term time horizons, like speculators, traders, and they do serve a purpose. They're usually like the first users, the first people in and out. So you not necessarily have long-term alignment anywhere, but you want like long-term alignment to be the main thing, but it doesn't have to be everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's indeed the case. I think also the new V token models that are coming out are, catering towards people with different time horizons and definitions of what is long term. So yeah, step in the right direction there.
Long-term subjective.
Definitely.
Okay.
Sometimes days can feel like weeks.
Awesome. Okay, we have a few minutes on the clock. And I would like to open it to the audience if you guys have some questions for the panelists. I don't know if we have a mic up there. But yeah, I see Reserve there. It was at their event in Denver when they first mentioned that, like the liquid lockers on top of VE is the liquid lockers are to VE what LRTs are to staked ETH, and that was a pretty revelational moment for me on the topic. Can we get a mic in the audience?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of room for growth, and I do see the next evolution, especially with restaking, that there's going to be protocols working more together, and there will be protocols that enshrine other protocol or components of other protocols in each other to have better like incentives.
They're like staking Legos.
Yeah.
What do you guys believe should be the governance model when it comes to having people vote and actually have the knowledge to make an informed decision instead of only having a financial roadblock is you should first buy the token and it's the only thing you need to do to get voting rights. Do you guys think the future of governance should be a form of a test that someone is capable of making good choices for the protocol instead of only being a degen token holder not knowing what he's voting on? Or do you think we should more cater towards a governance model where you have a committee that's selected by the core team and you can delegate to those because they have like a kind of a mindset and a vision, a profile, where you actually have like a political party kind of system where you would actually mimic the real world when you have a political system. So how do you guys envision, and which kind of type or maybe new type would you think would be the future for governance?
Yeah. I think delegation is the way to go. Whether it's by committees, by groups, if you want to run your protocol day to day, like you can't have everything to a vote. But with that said, with really important decisions, especially with things, with veto power, I think you should still give veto power to the people in extraordinary situations. And in that way, you preserve this democracy and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're actually fully on the right what you just said, and then as I said in the talk as well, like the panel, governance arenas. I want to see fights. I want to see the parts of the governance, because in any DAO you will enter in like Aave, MakerDAO, Curve, go into the forums, and you will see there's a lot of energy and a lot of commotion. People that want to move one side, people that want to move another side, and model it out and see how we can put it into like economic games, like see how we can, do.
Well,
do
in Rune's sub-DAO model that he mentioned last year for the new Make Sky, well, what is now Sky, his idea was we're going to have sub-DAOs that are competitive with each other, and may the best sub-DAO win. And so that's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's where it should go, like direct democracy into these DAOs, and then if they don't do a good job, we can fork them out or have some sort of a penalty against them. And I think MakerDAO indeed is innovating on that edge, and others will follow.
Yeah, no, I'm just aligned here. I think delegation is important, but there should also definitely be an incentive for people that delegate to not remain delegating their votes, but actually educate themselves, get more conviction in voting for themselves, and understanding the protocol and what the impact of their votes is. That should not be only a passive thing, so it should definitely be incentivized more. And I think for now, that's something that is kind of missing from delegation.
Yeah, I mean, the old models, funny enough, like I don't know if you guys remember Dash or the old models, not PIVX, or there was this other one that actually did Polynera or something. It was like some of these models were actually quite advanced, and they kind of worked, but what at the end happened, they're sponsoring football teams, NASCAR races, weird things, and we got really weird outcomes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, basically you need both incentives and knowledge, and a lot of the things that we have today are either over-indexing on one or the other. And hopefully we'll be getting better iterating. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to the audience as well. It's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers guys. Thank you very much.